morning, my fellow TOK peers. My name is James Earl Jones, and this is Jordan Spanks and Garrett Glass, who will be coming in a few. You will be viewing a debate between two parties that will present opposing views concerning shock art. Shock art has been a very controversial issue in modern day society. Recently, Yale student Alicia Chavez created a controversial shock art piece for her senior project. For the project, Chavez claimed she artificially inseminated herself several times and then took abortifacient drugs in order to abort the fetuses. Her pieces includes a video of herself cramping and bleeding in her bathtub, and a sample of her blood mixed with Vaseline wrapped in plastic. However, Yale University claimed that Chavez's project is a performance piece and that she never did any of these acts. Chavez still claims that she really engaged in them. Chavez said that the purpose of her project was to spark conversation and to debate on the relationship between art and the human body. Did Alicia's shock art go too far? Is her art unethical? Should it even be considered art? These are questions we would take into consideration to come to our main issue at hand, that would be attempted to come to a reasonable conclusion, which is, should it be a form of art accepted by society? Who would like to comment first? I would, Mr. Jones. First, I'd like to ask the question, what is art? There is no set criteria set in stone to determine if something is art. Art is something that can't be measured.
Garrett, there are 3 criteria that we can use to determine if something is art.
Please do explain these 3 criteria as thoroughly as possible. I am quite curious.
Okay. The first criterion is the intention of the artist. This means something is a work of art if it is made by someone with the intention of evoking an aesthetic response. If something is to be considered a work of art, it should not be made with a practical end in mind, but it must be made with the intention of pleasing or provoking people. The second criteria is the quality of the work. Art must show some skill. It is expected that when one views a piece of art that they observe an amount of skill incorporated in the piece. Throughout time, we have observed how skill determines the beauty of a piece. Beauty is also connected to content and form. The skill of an artist should be able to mix all of these components together. And finally, the third criterion of a work of art is the response of the spectators. Art should be informed with appealing the interests of a particular group of people. For art to be successful, an appreciative spectator is required.
Now that we have that established, what is the definition of shock art? Art that is produced on the basis of being controversial, shocking, disgusting, or offensive. Shock art is often made to comment on issues that society typically doesn't want to talk about. Thank you. So let us use this criterion for determining if shock art is really art or just junk. Shock art is not art, Jordan. It is junk that does not fit the criteria we have set.
Hold on, Garrett. You cannot allow your personal emotions to get in the way of our judgment. We must take a more reasonable and disinterested approach to determining whether shock art is actually a form of art. Let us do a thorough breakdown.
Fall back, Jordan. Shock art is not art because it does not fit the criteria that has been established earlier on in the debate. Shock art is not made with the intent of evoking an aesthetic response in the audience. Many shock art pieces does not incorporate much skill. It does not receive a positive response from its audience.
I beg to differ, Garrett. Aesthetics is the branch of philosophy that studies beauty and the arts. But what is beauty? We have a paradox of aesthetic judgment because we say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but then again, we have standards of beauty, Garrett. So what may be beautiful to you may not necessarily be beautiful to me. So in order to properly judge what is aesthetic in shock art, we need to first become disinterested, or put aside our biases and likes or dislikes. Also, not all shock art pieces incorporate little skill. Shock art is like other types of art in this way, Garrett. For example, Myra, by Marcus Harvey, was made up of thousands of children's handprints. Not just any average Joe could have made that. I would venture to say, Garrett, that shock art isn't always looking for a positive response. I think that shock art is created to make people think, to offend them. The artist may want to make a statement about a topic through their art in the hope that spectators will see it and share in their opinion. That is what Schwartz was trying to do with her art. She intended that her piece cause a stir so that others might join in her debate between the relationship between art and the human body.
But Jordan, okay, you are being relativistic by saying that what is beautiful to you may not be beautiful to me. We need to guard against relativism because having relativistic ideals prevent us from being certain about what should be considered art and what shouldn't be. Also, aesthetic judgment makes universal claims and determines the legitimacy of art. Did you ever think about shock art's inexhaustibility? Another characteristic of a work of art is inexhaustibility, which is the idea that we can come back to a piece of art time and time and time and time again and still find something new and different in it. Do you really think that people will come back to Schwartz's piece and still find new and interesting things in it? Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, Michelangelo's Pieta, and Rodin's The Thinker are still studied and viewed today. These are pieces that are known by the general public. Her piece was not art. It was cruel whether she actually inseminated herself and induced abortions or not. Hold on, guys. It's now time to move on. As you were discussing if it was really art, some questions came to mind. Who are the people that judge shock art? What defines the general public and who really attends these museums? Statistics show, Mr. Jones, that 44,000 people attend art museums a year. That's not many compared to the nation's population of over 300 million. How can shock art be fairly judged if not everybody viewing it is knowledgeable in the arts? The general public might just be jumping on the bandwagon when it comes to judging shock art. Because the media fans the fire surrounding shock art, people only hear bits and pieces, and therefore believe and take on the opinions of others without doing research and finding out information for themselves. This second-hand knowledge from the media leads to authority worship. We follow blindly that what we hear from authority figures without taking a second to think for ourselves, Jordan.
Even if this knowledge is secondhand, it is still serving its purpose of educating the general public in the arts. Most of what we learn in life is secondhand knowledge. The most effective way for us to have confidence in the knowledge we gain is that we will have to be, in the knowledge that we gain, we will have to be there to have experience. And even if we do experience it personally, we will run into problems with how we perceive it. Our perception dictates our interpretation. You can't expect the general public to know everything about art. They can only go based on the information that is presented to them. True, we have to be careful of the limitations of secondhand knowledge, but there is no way you can fully educate the public concerning arts. The value of the knowledge that is presented through these sources cannot fully be thrown away. The source in which the knowledge comes through is not one of the primary issues.
Okay, Ms. Banks. What is the primary issue that needs to be dealt with?
The real question that needs to be answered, Mr. Jones, is should society accept this type of art?
Okay, let us go about rationalizing this question. So what is your opinion, Ms. Spinks?
Shock art should be accepted by society because so many other controversial and questionable issues are. Abortion, though unpopular, is still legal in the United States. The death penalty is too in many states. But what makes this any different? Society needs to be careful of ethical inconsistency.
Shock art is contributing to ethical inconsistency, Jordan, in society. Shock artists think that they can make anything they want, no matter the ethical implications, because they're making a statement. Should we allow this to happen? Why can artists be unethical in their art, but society cannot? Alicia Chavert's art would definitely be considered unethical by some. But then again, others would say it's for the sake of art. Ira Isaacs, an infamous shock artist, says, art is what artists do. If it shocks you, it's art. Should we allow this to happen? Why can artists be unethical in their art, but society cannot? Just because you give it the title of being art doesn't justify it. Justification is important in determining if something is ethical or unethical. Jordan.
Society needs shock artists because they are willing to do what regular people are not. They show other points of view that we may not think of. It's good to see other sides of the situation so that we can better understand it, Garrett. Even if it's unethical, we can see what another person's thinking is and maybe develop empathy. Besides, we live in a society full of imperfection. So no matter what, we will always have a sense of ethical inconsistency. If we weren't, we would be living in a utopia. Garrett. That doesn't exist in this world because the world consists of humans who are imperfect. Ethical consistency will only come about if men were angels. One issue that when it comes to the topic of ethics is the self-interest theory. This theory tells us that humans are always selfish. You can't have consistency if everyone is trying to express their views.
These are very true points, Jordan and Garrett. This leads us to our next question, which is if we allow shock art to be accepted in society, will it have a desensitizing effect on it? Shock art is desensitizing our society. because shock art is usually extreme in its presentation. It breaks down the barriers of what is considered taboo. Jordan, Elizabeth, Spikes. Sometimes it seems like the artist is not as concerned with creating art, but rather making a political, moral, or ethical statement. Also, it is often desired by man to fight for freedom, the freedom to do anything that he wants to, even to focus on our personal culture. We can personally identify America being as a place of liberty. Throughout history, this has been proven. History is what gives us a sense of identity. To be able to not be bound, but to be able to express ourselves is one of the founding principles. Society can be found guilty of being biased in what is freedom. Freedom is such a vague term and can be interpreted however we want. The only principle that has put light limitations on freedom is if it is endangered the majority. Art, for the most part, is just a sense of expression and has not endangered society as a whole.
This is a good thing, though, Garrett. By desensitizing society, we are not keeping everyone sheltered from the real world. Unpopular ideas are not being hidden from the general public.
So, Garrett, what are you implying? That there should be limits on artistic freedom? Well, that's tough to say, but I guess so. If having limits means that we would not have obscene and offensive art thrown in our faces, then so be it. Even one who takes a deep study in ethics, one principle that supports the idea of ethics is limitation. There has to be an order that society has to live by. Without order, it can be reasoned that there would be chaos. This is something universal that all of mankind should not want to live in, a society of chaos. Ethics has played a mighty defense against chaos. Also, legal systems has somewhat kept order within society that it won't get out of hand. A perfect example of this is the recent 2008 Ira Isaac's case, where he was put on trial because of his obscene poo porn, and bestiality videos. In 2007, he was charged with 6 counts of distributing obscene material. He claims that his videos are not pornographic because his videos do not obtain any erotic elements. His defense for why his videos should not be accepted is, I eat meat. Though I wish I didn't, that's a hell of a lot crueler for a horse than getting a from a good-looking Dutch girl. My films are not cruel. Courts rule highly against him. This gives indication that there should be a limitation on artistic freedom. Art provokes ideas, and if the wrong type of art is unleashed, then there's the possibility to consider of art will feed the minds of individuals and even more issues society will have to war against.
I cannot believe what I just heard, Garrett. Limits on artistic freedom? That is like saying there should be limits on social commentary. Artists should have the freedom to create whatever they want. Why have art if there are limits? What would be the point? What would be the point, Garrett? I don't understand. Just like we have free speech, artists should have freedom of expression. Art would be nothing without it. How can we come to the truth if we can't look at it from different perspectives? Art allows society to see divergent perspectives. And the more perspectives that something has to look at, the more accurate and precise our conclusions can be made. This goes back to one of our foundations of knowledge, which is, how can we know if something's certain and not just a mere belief? We should want to be certain about the perspectives in society. Also, Isaac's situation, you're utilizing confirmation bias by only looking at the part of the situation that supports your judgment, or your argument, I'm sorry. The legal system is not very trustworthy because the judge who originally ruled over this case happened to own a website full of bestiality and other obscene material, Garrett. We still run into the issue of what defines something as ethical and unethical.
So this Alicia Shaverts, you believe that her art was perfectly okay? Hi, Jordan, do you believe it was okay? Oh. She have had limitations. Jordan, surely you cannot say that she was right in what she did.
Remember, Garrett, that she may not have induced these abortions. In the case that she didn't, then sure, why shouldn't she have been able to create a performance piece based on the relationship between art and the human body?
And if she did really inseminate herself and induce abortions?
This is where I come to some trouble, Garrett. I admit, I do struggle with this issue. Ethics is a very, very complex concept. We can try to classify issues as morally wrong or social conventions. In this case, I think that despite the immediate disgusted reaction that we all have concerning Schwartz's abortion piece, this is just a social convention about not having abortions. Her art piece, as brutal as it may seem, should not be considered morally wrong.
I beg to differ, Jordan, because you forgot one important area that needs to be considered. Religion. Religion plays a huge role in the establishment of moral standards. Even in art, religion had significant influences. Many religions are against abortion and the display of shock art in general. Even though individuals try to read religion as a basis of argument, you can't when it comes to the topic of ethics, okay? Make that clear.
But we shouldn't use religion because religious beliefs vary. Remember, there are a bunch of different ones. So, to use religion as an argument would not be a solid basis. As learned in the Theory of Knowledge class, different religions give different answers to certain questions. Some people are not satisfied with any of the answers that are on offer.
I agree with both of you. This will conclude our debate for today. Thank you, Jordan and Garrett, for your comments. Now that we have discussed both sides of the shock art issue, I would like to ask you for your personal opinions on shock art. Jordan.
So, I think shock art should be considered a form of art in society because it's a personal expression. And if we took that away, we would take away artistic freedom. And that would put limits on creativity in the world and all that. So I believe that one should be able to express oneself as long as it doesn't interfere with anybody else's rights. And shock art doesn't really interfere on anybody else's rights that I know of. So why not? Shock art. Woo!
After thorough investigation of this topic, I think that shock art should not be considered as a form of art by society. I strongly believe that it will cause other individuals to come up with new ideas that will begin to weaken ethical standards in society. Time has proven that society standards are constantly changing. I believe that shock art will begin to change society in an even more negative way. We have to keep order in society. This brings an end to our exemplar
Hopefully.
presentation. We hope that you have been enlightened concerning this topic.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.